Hey everyone, it's Miss Brooks with your Daily Dose of Math. Today we will be continuing our discussion of Section 3, solving equations with a variable on both sides. This will be part 3 of our notes on this section. This section focuses on distributing on both the left and the right hand side of the equals, as well as moving the variables on the same side of the equation. So let's take a look at some examples. Our first example is 100 times the quantity z minus 2/10 is equal to negative 10 times the quantity 5z plus 8/10. So even though this problem has decimals, we'll still be able to solve it. So let's do the math together. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to distribute the 100 on the left-hand side of the equals. So we need to multiply 100 with z and 100 with the 2/10. So 100 times z is going to be 100z. And then 100 times 2/10. So I can do this off to the side. 100 times 0.2. So 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 1 is 2. Now when you multiply and there's a decimal, we want to count how many decimal places there were. Well, there was just this one decimal place, so I want to move in one number and put my decimal. So this would be the same thing as 20.0, which is just 20. So we would have minus 20 equals, and now on the right hand side I'm going to distribute the negative 10. So negative 10 times 5z would be negative 50z. And then negative 10 times a positive 8/10. I know that'll be negative, but then multiplying out 10 and 8/10, again off to the side here, 10 and 0.8. So 8 times 0 is 0. 8 times 1 is 8. And when you multiply with decimals, you want to move in the same amount of decimals you had. So I had this one decimal, so I want to move in one decimal. So this would be 8.0, which is the same thing as 8. So after we distribute, now we want to get the variables on the same side. So we're going to add 50z to both sides of the equation. I'm choosing to add 50z because I had a positive 100 and a negative 50. And remember, I like to move the smaller of the two. So on the left, 100 plus 50 would be 150z. Bring down minus 20. On the right, the 50z's cancel and we have a negative 8. Please don't forget about the negative. And now it's just a two-step. So get 150z by itself. We'll add 20 to both sides. So we have 150z. And 20 minus 8 is 12. And then divide 150. Now clearly 150 won't go into 12, it's way too small, but I know both of these numbers can be divided by 2 because they're even. So I'm going to divide them both by 2. 2 goes into 12 6 times, and 2 goes into 150 75 times. And then I always want to ask myself, can I still simplify? Well, nothing can go into 6 outside of 2, 3, and itself. So 2 will not go into 75. 3 will go into 75 though. So I'm going to simplify this one more time by dividing by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And 75 divided by 3 is 25. So my answer to this equation would be z equals 2 over 25. The second example is 10d plus 15 equals 6 times the quantity d minus 1 plus 1. So to solve this equation, what we're going to want to do first is distribute the 6 on the right-hand side of the equals to get rid of the parentheses in our problem. So on the left-hand side, nothing is changing. So I'm just going to drop down 10d plus 15. And then on the right-hand side, I'll distribute the 6 to the d and the negative 1. Now I'm only distributing to d and negative 1 because those are inside the parentheses. I'm not going to extend to the plus 1 outside of the parentheses. So 6d would be 6 times d, and 6 times negative 1 would be minus 6. And then I'll drop down the plus 1 that was already there. At this point, on the left-hand side, there's still nothing that I can do yet. So I'm just going to drop down 10d plus 15 because these are not like terms. I cannot add them together. But on the right-hand side, I do have like terms. I have a negative 6 and a positive 1. Since neither one of these have variables, I can add those together. So I drop down 6d, and negative 6 plus 1 would be minus 5. So far in this problem, we had to distribute and then combine our like terms. Now you see on each side we have a variable and number, and there's nothing else we could do on just the left or just the right. So we're going to start getting the variables on the same side at this point. So I have a 10d and I have a 6d. Since 6 is smaller, I want to get rid of the 6d. Right now it's positive. The opposite would be a negative. So I'm going to subtract 6d on both sides. Again, notice how I'm lining up my variables each time, so make sure I subtract the correct things. So 10d minus 6d would be 4d. Drop down plus 15. And that's going to equal on the right just negative 5. And then it's a two-step equation. So with this two-step equation, we're going to want to get 4d by itself. So we're going to subtract 15 on both sides. So we'd have 4d equals negative 20. Remember, when they're both negative and we're adding, keep it negative and add the numbers. And then divide by 4. So d would equal, 4 goes into 25 times, and since it's a negative divided by a positive, it's negative 5. So d equals negative 5. It is now time for your first U-Try. Please pause the video and attempt the following problem yourself. When you have an answer, resume the video to check it. To solve this problem, what we first want to do is distribute on both the left-hand and right-hand side of the equation. So on the left-hand side, we want to multiply the 3 with both the x and the 5 inside the parentheses. So 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 5 is 15. On the right-hand side, we want to distribute the 7 to the x and the negative 4. So 7 times x is 7x, and 7 times negative 4 is negative 28. So once we distribute, we then want to check to see if we have any like terms on each side. So 3x plus 15 cannot combine. 7x minus 28 cannot be combined. So now we want to get the variables on one side of the equation. So I have a 3x versus 7x. 3x is smaller, so I'm going to move that by subtracting it. Since it's currently a positive 3x, a negative 3x would be the opposite. When I subtract the 3x, I'm left with 15. 7x minus 3x is 4x, and then I'll drop down minus 28. At this time, we want to get 4x by itself, so we'll add 28 to both sides. On the right, we have 4x, and 15 plus 28 is going to be 43. Now if we divide that by 4 to get x completely by itself, 4 doesn't go into 43, nor is there a number that will go into both 43 and 4. So our final answer to this equation will be x equals 43 over 4. Now it's time for your second U-try. Please pause the video and complete the following problem by yourself. When you have finished solving, resume the video to check your answer. To solve this problem, we first want to clear the parentheses by distributing. So on the left-hand side, we have 6 times the quantity x minus 4 plus 2. We're going to distribute the 6 to the x and to the negative 4. Since the 2 is outside the parentheses, we will not do anything to that number just yet. 6 times x will give us 6x. 6 times negative 4 will give us negative 24. And then I'm just going to drop down plus 2. On the right-hand side, I want to distribute 5 to the x and the negative 7 inside the parentheses. 5 times x is 5x. And 5 times negative 7 is negative 35. At this point, I would want to combine any like terms that I have on the left side or the right side. So on the left side, 6x minus 24 plus 2. Minus 24 plus 2 would be like terms because neither of those numbers have a variable. So I would drop down 6x. I'm not doing anything with that just yet. And negative 24 plus 2 would be negative 22. On the right-hand side, 5x minus 35. I cannot combine those because one has a variable and one does not. So I'm just going to write it down, 5x minus 35. Now that I have variables and numbers on each side with nothing else to combine, I'm going to get the variables on one side. So 6x versus 5x. 5x is smaller. So I'm going to subtract the 5x from both sides to get the variables on one side. I'm subtracting because it was originally positive. So I'll be left with negative 35. And 6 minus 5 is 1. So I have 1x, or just x, minus 22 equal to negative 35. So my last step here, I'm going to want to add 22 to both sides. So I'll be left with x. And remember, if they're opposite signs, we want to subtract the numbers. So 35 minus 22 would be 13. And then keep the sign of the bigger number. 35 is bigger than 22, so this is going to be negative 13. So our final answer is x equals negative 13. This concludes our lesson on Section 3, Part 3 of Chapter 1. If you have any questions, please ask Miss Brooks. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on your Daily Dose of Math, Miss Brooks.